So we're going to continue on the theme of security. I think that's a really timely and relevant topic. So I'm going to introduce to you Jeremy Jackson, who runs the security and analytics practice for Nth Generation. And then he's going to bring out some industry experts from a variety of different companies, a variety of different backgrounds, and we'll let them introduce each other, and we'll kind of go through a rapid fire of information that they'll provide, and then kind of some interaction between each other. So at this point, Jeremy Jackson. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Have a good day, guys. All right, it looks like the gang's all here. So thank you for coming out. Needless to say, seeing a lot of familiar faces and several new ones as well, so thank you for coming. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right on in here. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the structure that we're going to use today. So we're going to have a little rapid fire session. We're going to have each one of the panelists speak for 3 minutes, basically create a value prop for you. Then we're going to go, I have a few pre-seeded questions that we'd like the panelists to answer. And then finally, once, as we're going through these questions, if you could be thinking about interesting questions for the panelists, we'd certainly appreciate that. Needless to say, it's always better if we have an interactive session. So, and then we will be breaking for lunch at 12 o'clock. So it looks like we're on time to make sure that happens for you guys. So we're going to start with Jesse Trucks, Minister of Magic and Security Specialist at Splunk.
Hi.
Take it away.
Thank you. Glad to be here with my esteemed colleagues. So what we do at Splunk is we try to make sure anybody can use any kind of data they want, put it in one place, and then leverage that. And the reason I started working here almost 2 years ago now is because I love data. And I love the ability to do analytic approaches to anything. I've even helped people to analyze the results of a research project for schools, for teachers, that had nothing to do with machine data. You can use it for anything. And all of that data becomes, as we all know in this room, security relevant, because if you can't access data that could relate to something on the network, or a behavior that is visible on the network that is something outside like physical security, then you might not be able to react to those things. And the reason that we try to get as much data in this Splunk as possible is because you might not realize that there are multiple prong attacks. We're in an arms race. The bad guys are making new bombs every 14 seconds. We have to make new defenses for these bombs faster than that. The only way to do that is to stop looking for an H bomb or an A bomb or a dirty bomb, but what might look like a bomb? The only way to do that is to have as much data as possible. So that's the approach that we like to take. I personally love to try to do more analytic approaches to use statistical analysis to find outliers, and even to find things that fall within your normal range but are in a pattern that looks different, that looks odd. And that's why I like using our tools, because you can look across this data sources like manufacturing plant. What if a robot is moving differently and more slowly than it used to, but at the same time, the welding machine is getting hotter than it used to? Or in a hospital, are you going to have your IoT systems that measure drugs get tampered? Are those things in your network? Are you looking at these things? So you realize that there is a plethora of changes in drug dispensaries at the same time that there's an increase in DDoS attacks. Those may be related because they're all automated. And it's a terrifying world. It really is. Like I was talking to my colleagues, like, what makes you sleep at night? Nothing. But we can all do better for organizations, for a people, for society, if we can understand more of how these things work on an organic level.
Awesome, thank you. And next up, John McClure from Cylance.
Thank you. It's good to be with you here. I was having flashbacks as Ty was talking. 20 years ago, I was Ty. I told him backstage, quit your whining. You got 60? We only had 2 in our day. I was doing battle with Dark Dante, and he was correct. Even in those days, we were reactive. I worked on the Joint Terrorism Task Force, one of the first we had in Los Angeles. We were reactive, even though we were trying to be proactive. They put me in undercover at the CIA to go after spies. Again, after all we learned about trusted insiders and how to recognize them, we were still only playing catch-up. My entire life has been the reactive. I feel like Bill Murray in that movie Groundhog, where every day I wake up, I cannot escape the world of the reactive. And there were forces pulling and wanting me to stay in the world of the reactive. I was getting accolades. In fact, I was one of the individuals who, when I left government and entered the private sector, started championing this mantra. This was my MBA working for me. You need to manage expectations. I'll get to my management, let them know it's not if we're going to get compromised, it's when. So when the crap hits the fan, then they don't fire me, but they engage in a more important discussion like, how quickly did you detect? How well have you enclaved our critical IP? And how efficiently and effectively did you expel them and leverage your new insights to garner that next level you're going to make them hop over as they come along? I grew up in that reactive world, received accolades for the intricacies, the way in which I created a defense in-depth structure. It was almost elegant. It was rated 3 years in a row, #1 when I was at Dell, for the way in which I pulled that together. Costly, resource intensive, but beautiful. I provided jobs for all my employees. And we had a certain job security as we continue to try to detect as quickly as possible. But again, nonetheless plagued by the fact that I was living groundhog and was never going to wake up from that until I happened upon Cylance. And people say, hey, we've noticed what on earth is going on at Cylance. The head of security at Intel has recently left there to join Cylance, and now the head of security at Dell. What on earth is going on over there? Nothing less than the most absolutely disruptive technology I've seen in my 30 years, and an opportunity for me to finally jump from the world of the reactive into the world of the proactively predictive world of prevention. And that's exactly what we're facing. I was actually knee-deep or neck-deep in an APT attack when at Dell, my CTO, also fed up with the reactive game, says, I'm going to finally survey the community out there as to those 60 entities out there that claim to have an ability at advanced endpoint protection. He amassed a collection of malware, 4,100 instances of malware, 460 of which were 0-day, and launched that against all 60 solutions. One solution came out with a 99.7% deflection rate. I was busy fighting APT. I heard on the chatter about that. My first reaction, that's BS. I've lived with these partners for 30 years, and the best I ever got on them was 20%, maybe 40%, on a really good day, maybe 60%. I don't believe it. When the fog of battle cleared, I had my team, I said, go get that attack vector that just cleaned our clock, run it against Cylance, and when they fail, you come back and tell me, so I can deflect the push to immediately deploy it, because I've got important things to do based on this APT. We'll then get back to business. They came back a little while later and said, boss, we don't know what to tell you. If we'd had Cylance up in place, we would not have lost Christmas. We would not have those long hours we've been saying, we would not have been doing that. And I was blown away, because the cascading implications of that suddenly hit me. The downstream implications, the structure, the costs, the resources, the energy, all that goes into that downstream implication started to distill upon me, and I started envisioning the way in which I could apply those potential savings and resources over to some very intractable problems that we're going to be facing here in the future. Have I gone over my 3 minutes yet?
Oh, you're just about there. I was about ready to ask for a cane, but no, it's very intriguing stuff.
We'll talk more. At the end of the day, I say to you, don't trust me. I didn't trust my CTO. I had to validate it for myself. Test it yourself. The res ip, it's the Latin, the attorney means coming out. Res ipsa loquitur. The thing speaks for itself. There's going to be a lot of chatter as we try to unseat the established paradigm. And as you do that, the discussion is going to get really cloudy and murky. Cut through all of that. Don't trust any of it. Test it yourself like I did. And
Awesome.
You'll welcome to the new world.
Thank you. And next up, we have Neil Bryden from HPE Security.
Good morning. One of the things that I find very, very interesting is how this entire marketplace is evolving. And one of the things that I find so surprising is the recognition of names, as in the recognition of vendors, etc. I'm fairly sure that most of you are familiar with HP. Challenge is, I really do wonder how many of you think of HP as a security vendor. I suspect it's actually quite a low number. But in actual fact, HP is very, very big into security. But we are focusing around very specific areas. I've been involved in security now for pretty close to 30 years. And during that time, I've been advising a lot of customers, CISOs, et cetera, around their security programs. And equally, I've been responsible as a CISO for running my own program. What we are seeing today is very, very significantly different from what we've seen in the past. And we've got to think about things in a different manner. There are two major trends that I see within the security world. One of them is the bad guy is getting really, really good. He's getting organized, he's becoming professional, and to not pick on a presidential candidate, but the guy that we're worried about is not 400-pound kid sitting beating on his keyboard in his mother's basement. It is organized business now, and we have to look at it in that manner. One of the scary stats that you'll find is that the period of time once a breach has occurred that people are on your network for is up at about 250 days. That's a long, long time. And one of the things that we've got to do is we've got to be able to find those guys in a much more proactive and real-time manner. And that's one of the areas that HP really works on. Another thing that is a major change in the environment is these guys. The way in which we do and perform business today has changed dramatically. I can guarantee you that I am more likely to be accessing my business information using one of these things, sitting in a Starbucks cafe, and accessing the information in the cloud. And if we think about that, the way in which we've historically built the perimeter and put the controls in on the infrastructure simply doesn't make sense in that type of paradigm. However, what you now have is, and we've always had, is users accessing data using applications. And so that's where we're focusing. We are providing the capabilities to improve the applications. How do we write good code in the first place? The other element is the data. How do we secure the data so that the data as it's traveling, not only is it secured when it's on different pieces of infrastructure or on the network, it is at a data level, it is being protected. And so some of the technologies that we have there around our encryption suites are very, very important in that area. And the final piece is, and I'm not sure where I am on my time, but...
You're about ready to get that hook again.
Yeah. The final piece is the users. We have to understand using analytics whether the user at the other end of the wire is one of the person that we think it is, or whether it is somebody that's attacking us. And so the greater use of analytics to enable us to identify those individuals and find anomalies, it becomes very, very important as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil. Next up, Mr. Jim Graham from Varonis.
Morning, everyone. Yeah, at Varonis, I think we have a unique opportunity, and just a pleasure to be on stage with these gentlemen. You think about it in an organization, right? You know, the biggest threat that you guys, well, actually, the thing to think about is your most sensitive information, right? These are sitting in your files, on your file servers, right? This is sitting in emails. This is stuff that we're creating every single day, okay? Now, the greatest threat to that data, you know, is we'd like to envision, right? Someone sitting from the outside just stewing about stealing all your secrets, but it's actually the people you trust every single day. It's the people sitting next to you. It's the cube right across from you, right? This is your greatest threat. So how does Varonis help protect against that insider threat, right? So using analytics, I think it's critical. You know, it's like with your kids, right? And you ever walk in the room and go, who did it? Imagine having that same visibility, being able to look and say, okay, I see patterns, I see behavior, right? So what we do is we create that baseline of behavior for every single person and machine that's touching your data. And with that, now we can give you that visibility, right? What is someone about to do 2 weeks before they leave your organization? Or who's about to work on a major science project, right? And is now stealing your corporate data, walking out the front door with it. So this is stuff that we're seeing. This is the really scary part, and we talk about it all the time now. It's not so much as trends or, you know, signatures or unique instances. It's actually behavior, right? And so I think it's a good time to be in this industry. So,
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. And last but not least, Mr. Jerry Kraft, a longtime friend of mine and a cohort in crime. So we'll actually be presenting right after this, kind of showing you what's in our tool bag. So if you like the dark side, you might want to check that out after this. So, Jerry.
Dark side's right, because we're going to have all sorts of tools that we use, like the Wi-Fi Pineapple, USB Rubber Ducky. We have some Yagi devices. We're going to show you a great deal of information at that breakout. So it's at 12:15. Come see us. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jerry Kraft. I am the Chief Information Security Officer here at Nth Generation. I have a long tenure as a Chief Information Security Officer at a small $7 billion financial institution in Long Beach. And I did that for 17 years. So I have a long tenure in doing security, and it's been fun. And I'm glad to be on Red Team, to be honest. The Red Team's better. So I had a joke about us being on the dating game, but I won't do it because it kind of looked like we were on the dating game there for a minute. But I'm the prettiest. With that, what Jeremy and I have set up with Nth Generation is a security practice that has products and services for you. And some of you have been buying our products, and as you can tell, we have a wide array of things. And when you think about building a practice from scratch, what Jeremy and I did together is we kind of took a layered approach, 7 layers in the OSI model, and tried to hit every one of them for you so that we have an answer to what it is that you might need as you do your security. But with that, these are all products we use. I've been a customer of Varonis. Nth Generation uses Cylance, okay? HPE, I can't talk enough about them, right? And of course, we do all of the different types of security within Nth Generation, and I did it at the bank, and Jeremy did it. He had these products in his insurance company when he was a CISO as well. So these are things that we believe in. These are things that we put in place for that purpose, that we feel that we're comfortable coming to you on a consulting engagement and say, these are the things for you. These are the right tool sets. But on the security consulting side, we do penetration testing. We do ethical hacking engagements. Jeremy and I are both SANS Institute mentors. Jeremy teaches the CISSP curriculum. I teach SANS 560, which is their ethical hacking and pen testing course. So we have that knowledge, that background, that experience. I'm over 20 years. Jeremy's over 20 years of experience. So when you get us in your environment to do some sort of security consulting engagement, we're talking with experience, okay? And one of the big experience plays we have right now is what we call our virtual CISO. I'm looking across the crowd because I see about 6 of my virtual CISO clients. These are clients that have engaged us to come out and be that CISO that they don't have and help them build the program. So before Jeremy pulls the hook on me, because he'd like to, come see us in the breakout, come see us in the showcase, and we'll talk about vCISO. Very blunt, a very quick introduction is we take something like a framework, align it to what you have, and build a security roadmap with KPIs on where you need to go. And that's a whole new approach. It's a full strategy approach. So that's us.
Awesome. Thank you, Jerry. So it is really interesting. If you look at the suite of panelists, I've been in the security industry since '94, and you see that pretty much everyone up here is really focused on analytics. It's no longer the block and tackle, point, source and destination port. We're seeing a lot of advanced analytics and machine learning, neural networks, and leveraging R and things of that nature that's really driving the security motion forward. I find it really intriguing. So first question for you guys. So earlier this year, US and Canada government issued a rare joint alert on ransomware and recent events. So to the panelists, what are some of the best practices that US organizations should implement in order to help stop this serious worldwide threat? Maybe, would you like to start?
I'll go first. So just to say it, I love ransomware. It's the greatest thing on the planet. And it's the greatest thing on the planet because it actually identifies and shows you exactly every security failure you've had. It went through your perimeter. It went through your network. It hit one of your workstations. Somebody clicked on it. all right? It went through your email. Now they clicked on it. It ran. Not only did it run, but then it started laterally going across your network. And after that, it encrypted a bunch of things and took over your data, the jewels of your kingdom. And then it went ahead and ransomed you, right? Now you got that thing right in front of you, okay? That says you need to pay $500. Now you have to decide, the next thing is does your DR work, does incident response work, and does BCP work? Okay, and I've had customers that encountered this, but it's beautiful because I'm not going to go into products. It's beautiful because what we do is we take strategy and we say, what layers did you miss? What can we put in place there to help you have a better front end to that? So my answer is to build strategy about how to do security, implement the right products and procedures to get this done in a very cohesive way, rather than just rely on a point product that's not a silver bullet situation. It actually identified several areas of weakness in your organization. So I love it because it's a clear indicator to management that you need to have more investment into security and that you need to have a cohesive plan.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you need budget, you'll quickly find it when you start having to triage that.
Of course, my response to that's going to be sort of immediately biased because, again, I think one of the best practices, again, if you're standing outside of the old paradigm of reaction with all its layers of analysis, forensics, response, remediation stuff, you step out of that paradigm into the one of proactively predicting and preempting, preventing before it strikes. That would, I say, would be the best practice then out of that new paradigm. Of course, then the question could say, well, at what level do you apply your artificial intelligence and your machine learning? You have at pre-execution or post-execution. Mm-hmm. Post-execution, for those who are looking to generate revenue through forensics and all the other things that exist downstream, might be where you want to go. I don't think that'll rise to the level of being best because you'll want to deploy your AI and your machine learning pre-execution, because then that downstream stuff gradually will realize we don't need to spend the money there anymore, or the resources and energy. We can divert that to either a dividend for the shareholders or to another investment in an area that's just as critical. And in terms of governments, I think many of you maybe heard the US government come out on its OPM report a couple of weeks ago, where indeed they called out Cylance's role in the identification, mitigation, and surveying of that environment. And again, speaks to, again, one of those things that could contribute to what we'll now start to see as the best practice when it comes to mitigating things like this.
Awesome.
I think one of the scariest parts about ransomware, right, is that, it's the one that's kind of in your face. But I think the one thing that we've kind of learned from this, and I think AI is great, and machine learning is perfect, and these are all great solutions that we have in place now for, these zero-day threats, but really the reason why they're so effective is because we're traditionally very lazy. Right? So our environments are what really is causing this, right? Our kind of, many cooks in the kitchen kind of philosophies, lack of procedure, lack of process. We kind of do it to ourselves. And so I think this is, best way to kind of blocking this is to, like you said, put down those least permissions, philosophies, right? And understanding that, we tried to prevent impeding the flow of business or the growth of business, but as a result, we're almost building our castles on sand, so.
Yeah, even the ransomware guys are lazy to the extent they'll use the same core elements or characteristics, which is what allows us to determine before they execute that, hey, this is going to be a bad piece, let's stop it.
Right.
Yeah, their laziness is going to undermine them as well.
I think one of the biggest challenges we have in this area is that it's basically very cheap and doesn't require a great deal of sophistication on the part of the adversary. It also has a significant payout. And so therefore it becomes very, very attractive. The Me Too type approaches as well, as you're saying. Yes, we can identify some of them through the signature type approaches, but we've got to recognize that this is going to get more and more difficult. And I think that the longer term position is that the only way we're really going to solve this is, one, we've got to up the cost to the bad guy, and I think that's probably going to be around the area of penalties. But two, we've got to stop paying for it. It's the same as if we've got a hostage in a foreign country. Nations don't want to pay. Now, I'm not advocating that either of those are the right way to go in every single situation, but the reality is that if we keep paying, we're going to continue to see this. And from our perspective, what can we do in here? I think that there's some multi-layer approaches that we've got to take. Education is definitely one of them, but it's not going to be a panacea. There's no doubt about that. We need to get secure, comprehensive backup solutions. And we also have to improve our ability to detect when it's occurring to us so that we can mitigate the damage that's actually there. But one of the most important things I would say is we got to prep. We've got to know in advance what we're going to do if this occurs to us and practice it so that we can understand what is the damage that's been done to us in advance. Because they have us off balance. And when we're off balance, we make bad decisions. And so I think that prepping is a very important aspect as well.
Absolutely.
I think one of the themes that, excuse me, that we're all kind of dancing around too is, and you mentioned education, and the layer you didn't call out directly is social engineering. If our people are still calling, somebody down the street in your office, down the hall, and they're a scientist, even very smart person, they don't know IT. They're going to pick up the phone and they're going to try to, especially if it, oh, Microsoft help, I got to get this done. They don't realize necessarily that the first thing they should do is just go ahead and unplug the machine. But that must rely on backup strategies, and you have to have really good backups. So when people, my short answer when people ask me, like, what do I do about ransomware? I say, always make sure every moment, as much as possible, your data is backed up somewhere. In an organization, it's whatever internal or cloud-based architecture you have. And make sure that as soon as everybody's educated, so as soon as this happens, you unplug it and you call up IT, say, please wipe my box. Just wipe it, reinstall, keep going. As we like to say, and I've spent 20 years doing IT operations and security, and one of the things we always say is cattle, not pets. Computers are cattle, they're not your pets. Our desktops and our laptops, we have stickers on them. I do, I'm a geek, and we love them, and we change the icons, and we customize them. And then they get hacked, or they get old, or the hard drive breaks, and we start this all over again. Now stop doing that. Just shoot the thing in the head, get a new one. But the other thing is, one of the things that a lot of organizations aren't even necessarily aware of is what we call watering holes. And at Oak Ridge National Labs, we would look at, and we're investigating how to watch watering holes. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, everybody in your organization or a specific location will have a number of websites they go to on a regular basis, weather.com, the LAtimes.com, whatever. And what people are looking to do is target specific organizations by inserting ads that have malware that look for IP addresses, logins, whatever other kind of thing they can look for to do drive-by on your specific organization. They're targeted attacks. And then we see this all the time. So you have to look for this kind of thing from these watering holes. You can't just block them. Your people are going to get around it somehow, or they're going to walk out of the office and lowers productivity. The reality is you got to check the weather. You got to look at the news. Especially most of us are in jobs where we have to be aware of what's happening in the world, no matter what your position is. And so we figure out how to analyze those kinds of things and detect them. And I'm sure that there's several people here who have done this kind of thing as well, to proactively look for and detect watering hole and ransomware and things like that.
That's one of the liberating aspects of Cylance. Rather than trying to wrap your arms around and control that situation, you liberate your employees and say, pretty much go on out to any watering hole you want now, because anything that they try and throw at you, Cylance will deflect because it'll detect it pre-execution. So it's liberating in that you don't have to even worry about that post-execution concern that dominated our world for so long.
But if you don't have a tool to do that, then you're dead in the water.
But we can help you with that.
Nice, nice. So we only have about a little over 16 minutes left. Before I continue on with some of our other questions, I was curious, we have a lot of brain trust up here right now. If anyone, excuse me, had a burning question or desire to ask the brain trust up here, I wanted to take a brief pause if anyone had some questions for us. Yeah, we have a couple microphones, so you just raise your hand. Okay, right here in the front. Oh, right here.
Your hand's up.
Oh, okay. Here we go, right back here, guys.
Yep. Step up.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, thought they were running it.
I know. Hello. I know that this year ransomware is the big threat, but what do you guys see coming on the horizon? What do you see this evolving into next?
I think that ransomware is going to, when we talk about ransomware, we're talking about a piece of software that's going on the box that's exploding and doing bad things. But we're seeing ransomware come in different flavors now. Yep. We're seeing it in emails, we're seeing it in activity on networks, we're seeing user IDs getting stolen. So like the gentleman from Splunk said, you know, if you're paying the bill, they're going to keep doing it, and they're going to expand their business to do better things, and that's what they're doing. When Ty was up here, he talked about how, you know, they're sending out emails to people in the finance department saying the CEO says, make this wire now. So they're using social engineering techniques to make ransomware the next big thing.
Understandably, again, I'm not any more worried about ransomware, even though it's got a lot of the press lately. It's just another type of malware. Again, and once we've mapped what its core qualities and attributes are and can weave that into the matrix and the matrix into the algorithm that sits on the endpoint, I'm not going to worry about that so much. What I am going to worry about is if we start to constrict the battle space around cyber exploits such as that, we are going to push the bad guys back into the physical realm. And that's an aspect of this I think we need to be aware of. And the idea of pulling our physical and our cyber programs together under one umbrella to watch for those ebbs and flows, I think is going to be absolutely critical. We're going to have to watch for that push back into the physical until they adopt AI in some sort of creative way, and that battle continues. But we're going to see that flow between the physical and logical.
One of the things that I've been seeing for years as a strong trend is that these things morph constantly, and they're actually starting to be written so they rewrite themselves on the fly. And they're literally looking at what kinds of defenses you have once they get behind the squishy, you know, into the squishy center, and they're adjusting to what your environment is. They've got all kinds of branch execution things. They have internally packed binaries that are exploding within itself to be able to alter on the fly. And the only way to see these things, and I should back up, part of the reason is that is to customize for it. You could write one that'll target 7 different companies, you stick it up in LA Times, wait for one of them to grab it, oh, it's this one, go. And so you have to back up and look at the kinds of behavior that's happening. And I agree that ransomware specifically isn't the problem. It's the methodologies that it's using are so sophisticated that the end payload and what it's trying to do, is it trying to get you, encrypt your desktop and get you to call in? Is it trying to do exfiltration through lots of complicated mechanisms? And we're also seeing exfiltration be so smart. It's doing stuff combination, single file through DNS exfiltration, ICMP exfiltration. It's doing a parallel multiple attacks. So there is no one thing that kind of rises to the surface. This is why you have to look at a coordination of all kinds of events and have different types of ways of looking at the same data.
I'd like to take a slightly different tack on the question. I suspect that the question was actually directed as what are the types of technical attacks we're going to see. I actually think we're going to see an expansion of what is the business associated with ransomware, and that is basically it's a form of extortion. I believe that what we're going to see is more and more of that type of way of trying to monetize what's going on. And the concerns that I have are centered around, we have not yet seen the impact of the OPM breach. We don't know what's going to happen there, but I'm fairly certain that we're going to start to see people being compromised within our environments that are because of their past or some other types of element. And so I see extortion becoming very, very serious type of business within the hacking environment.
I mean, yeah, if you look at like just Ashley Madison, I mean, think it was, what, 25 million records stolen at OPM, 40 million records stolen. I mean, it's just
well, if you think about Yahoo, that's based on the numbers that were up there earlier, that is a 1/6 of the people on the planet's credentials compromised. Yep. That is massive. And so we're going to see more and more of that type of thing. And I do believe that health records and more extortion is actually part of what we're going to see in the near future.
But I think that, yeah, I mean, so we talk a lot of like technical attributes of these attacks. But I think if you just take a step back, and I think these are all necessary, right, as we continue and put up satellites and perimeters and, make a better rifle or whatever you're going to do, but what it really boils down to is it's the source, right? It's our complacency. It's really boiling down to they're going to continue to go to these treasure troves of information based on the availability, right? Why do I go to one glass of water when I've got an entire reservoir over here? It's just they're going to continue to do that. And I think these are all avenues to get to that information.
And the bad guys are going to watch the way ransomware has created an infrastructure to support those perpetrating it.
Yep.
Ransomware as a service. Other parts of crimes are going to start mimicking that, and we're going to see that, I think, proliferate as well, so that you're supported in your activities and everything you need to have a successful ransomware business.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think people are one of the biggest problems, both from a credential perspective as well as from a social engineering perspective. We can write great applications, but so for example, I'm working on a casino right now that they've actually done really good with their technology. So, we're leaning more on tailgating and physical intrusion at this point. So, you always, be like water, find the easiest path. And I would say it's becoming more and more the people that's the easiest path. Another question?
Yeah, we talked here on the attack side. I'm curious on the protection side. There's been some recent discussion around software-defined perimeter, and I'm wondering how much of it is mythical, magic, easy button, pixie dust at this point versus is there actually a future in that approach, and thoughts around that?
I don't think that there's actually any pixie dust of any sort, even remotely. We all have great products and services that we either produce ourselves or use in coordination with other companies.
Says the master of magic?
Yes, says the master of magic. People ask me, what does that mean? I say, I make magic happen.
Without pixie dust.
Yeah, but the reality is that it's another way of doing more complex process implementation and technology. All of this goes back to the physical world. It starts with humans and it ends with humans. It's humans creating data, it's humans leaking data. And so you have to have these really complicated infrastructures and technologies in place with a process. So you step back, and if your software-defined perimeter or other types of methodologies, whether it's a certain types of endpoint protection, data collection, it's all about how does your process work and how are your people understanding what that process is, whether they're technical or not.
I mean, even if you think about it, right? So we use the term perimeter a lot. I think it keeps us safe. We use something we can associate with it, but look at it. Office 365, Amazon. More and more businesses are now going to cloud-based solutions where there is no perimeter. And everything we've discussed today, I mean, one raw fact that I think is, business owners and, business people is that 70% of the problem all resides at that person sitting behind the desk. 70% of all the attacks were on unstructured data that people had access to.
So if you think about it, much to your point, really, we all have mobile devices.
Yep.
We are the perimeter. Every single human being in your organization and every system is the perimeter. The network devices, the individual computers, and the human beings.
Yeah, I think that the challenge around the end user or the user is going to be the major problem that we have to deal with. I've looked at it for many, many years, and I simply don't believe that we can do authentication in a manner that is going to guarantee. And so what I'm looking at is how do we use analytics much more to understand how people are doing things and spotting the anomalies.
Yeah, and in the wake of Snowden, the U.S. government required those of us who are doing business with the government to demonstrate that we have up and functioning and already viable insider threat piece, which I think, even though they haven't specified what viable means, it's going to be looking to see to what extent have we actually deployed and utilized advanced analytics in pulling together those disparate data points that are potentially indicative of the trusted insider going bad, because we've been amassing those indicators since George Washington's time. Yeah. Now it's a matter of pulling that together and utilizing, protecting things like privacy, anonymizing until the critical point at which you need to identify the human.
To the earlier conversation around extortion, they're going to go after individuals within our companies as well. And what's going to happen there is we won't know whether that individual is the insider or whether it's somebody from the outside manipulating. that individual. What we have to understand is looking at how that person normally operates, and then are they doing something different? What are the anomalies that are starting to occur? And use of analytics, in my view, is one of the major ways.
Perfect AI. Yeah. Challenging.
Absolutely. Any other questions? All right, well, I got one more for you guys then. So, according to the analysts, breach organizations are generally taking about 250 days before they're actually realizing they've been breached. How do you think we could reduce this duration?
I mean, you have to have an activity. You have to understand what's going on, right? And so the first thing an organization should do, right, is create that audit trail, right? Turn on the lights, so to speak. You know, walk into that hotel room with a black light. It's really what you got to do. And so once you have that visibility, they can stop that quickly.
And the OPM breach is another good example of this. They engaged us, we got the product deployed, but that didn't say anything about what had already come in the gate and was already out there. It wasn't until we turned the prowess of our AI on their already embedded base that we discovered the stuff that was laying out there. So one of the good news is that prowess can be turned inward looking. You can do what we call a compromise assessment. That's unusual from the threat assessment or the vulnerability assessment. It assumes you already have been had for maybe 250 days. You turn it towards that compromise assessment and then wield the tool in expelling that.
One of the things we see is, of course, my earlier speech about doing on multiple data sources. This is how you find these things. Because quite often you talk to these organizations, you're like, I used to work for the DOE. All across the DOE, it was pretty well known that, oh, this organization was hacked 153 days ago, this one 392 days ago. But they didn't have a single view into multiple data sources. They had network people looking at networks, system people looking at systems, security people looking at firewalls. But if you look across them, these things become very apparent very quickly. And we've seen organizations go from the 150, 250 day old compromise that is just discovered to finding them within real time in a relative sense, within the day, sometimes minutes. And if you can go from 250 days to minutes, you can change from the 40 million records being exfiltrated to catching it and nobody knows what happened, nobody even knows that anything happened at all. And that's really what you need to do, is get across all of your data sources and figure out how they matter to your business. And this is one of the things where a lot of companies struggle with is, and obviously there's a number of people here who can help you with this, is how do you map your technology and your business? Most of us have business people doing business and technology people doing technology. But if your tech people don't understand your business, then they cannot actually help you secure and automate and to push and support your business. Me as a technologist, I always ask why. Why? What are you trying to do? And they're like, well, it doesn't matter. I just need a website. Oh, what are you trying to do? I'll give it to you. What are you trying to do? Let me help you solve a problem. You have to get joined like this. This is the whole DevOps movement where you understand what is the holistic environment that you're trying to deal with and manage.
And that's true about the security industry. We're no longer the guns, gates, guards, and geeks. We now really have to be business professionals.
Absolutely.
And it's no longer security, because that carries too much baggage. I really like to think of this now as business assurance. The first word out of our mouth is, I'm here about business, and we need to know it just like you said.
I like it.
I think there's a very interesting related stat that goes with the 250 days. And that is that I think it's something like 90% of breaches are identified by a third party.
Yes.
And what is so interesting about that is that means the data's been exfiltrated. And you have to remember, the actual breach is not the primary concern. It is the damage that's caused subsequently because they're in there for 250 days and what they're getting away with. And I think it's very important, therefore, that we need to be able to bring that 250 days down to, if we can, minutes type scenarios. And we have to move from a position or rebalance our portfolio from we're going to prevent them from getting in to we're going to find them as quickly as possible when they have got in, but before they've got the data out or whatever it is that they're looking for.
Of course, that still requires a very intense structure, headcount, funding, and everything else. If indeed you can get your clock tuned just right in terms of never letting them get in the first place, that downstream complexity, as elegant as we can be constructed and as profitable it is for many of our companies, because we're in the security business, we can start to do away with that if again, they don't even get through the door in the first place.
Well, I'm more practical, having run organizations, and my practical experience is that you have to have multi-layer. And so when I talk to customers about this and how do we mitigate this risk, it is actually doing tests, doing incident response the way incident response is supposed to be done, actually having those tabletop discussions. As I did for you here a few minutes ago, I went through every layer of security that was bypassed because of ransomware. We need to do that in our own buildings. We need to do that in our own organizations and actually bring everybody into the organization who needs to be part of that incident response. I do these regularly with my vCISO clients, and very successful in opening up where those problems reside. And 9 times out of 10, it is the human at the end of the tunnel. The endpoint, the true endpoint, I think was represented at RSA and Black Hat. Humans are the endpoint. So definitely think that testing this stuff, making sure it really works, spend an hour of your day, 1 day out of every quarter, doing an incident response test.
And one of the things we did a number of years ago, I worked with at AT&T, and one of the things that we were working on is our system recovery plan for IT operations was the exact same plan for a security breach incident response. And we used it every time the system crashed. And so we tested our BCP every single time we did a change, upgraded, or fixed a server, or replaced a server. And that way, it wasn't, oh, our incident response is out of date. How do we get the Oracle database back up? Or where's the logs, or anything like that. Every single day, these things were tested. If you can merge things like that and keep it tied to the business and educate your users, you're going to bring your risk, your capabilities up and your risk profile down.
And we pick on the users, but we should educate IT too, right?
They're users.
They're users, right? And they make mistakes. We've experienced breaches where the IT was actually phished and they came through the front door through the VPN because IT gave away the username and password to his domain admin. So even IT can be that user who needs some education.
Absolutely. Well, sounds good, guys. I really appreciate all the insight. So I think we are holding you between you and the food right now. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and break. And I believe the food's out the back. And would you like to come take it back over?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Good. Great. Thanks. Appreciate it.